I'm Jenna Monroe, 28 years old, and the day my life unraveled wasn't some dramatic explosion. It was quiet. It was the sound of tires on asphalt, fading into the Wyoming sun while I stood outside a gas station holding a bag of snacks and the illusion that I still mattered to the people who drove away. We were supposed to be celebrating my college graduation with a family road trip to Colorado. But what they called a joke, abandoning me in the middle of nowhere, became the moment everything changed. I never went back. Not for 16 years. And by the time they found me again, I wasn't the same Jenna they left behind. I was the youngest in the Monroe family. Grew up in Chicago, where winters were brutal, and the people even more so, especially the ones related to me. My parents, Linda and Charles, prided themselves on building character through humiliation. They believed in tough love, which in our household meant targeted emotional warfare with a punchline. My older brothers, Derek and Trent, carried the tradition with pride. Birthdays were never just birthdays. They were setups for fake disappointments and public embarrassment. My sweet 16, they told me nobody showed up because they forgot to send invitations. I cried for hours until they burst out with cake and friends yelling surprise. Prom? Trent told my date I had the stomach flu, and I spent the evening explaining I wasn't actually contagious. Every time I was told to lighten up, that it was all just good fun. Linda, my mother, liked to whisper compliments with barbs. That dress would be perfect if you dropped a few pounds. Or, you're pretty, Jenna, when you don't look so tired. My dad? He just laughed. Loudest in the room every time I got caught in a prank. Derek, 32, worked at the Monroe Insurance Group, being groomed to take over. Trent, 30, managed the marketing department, mostly by plagiarizing Reddit slogans and making interns cry. I had just graduated with a degree in graphic design, hopeful, idealistic, and a little foolish. I dreamed of moving to Austin or New York and designing for real creative agencies. My family had other plans. You can work for the family, my mom said during my graduation dinner. Design flyers. It's better than chasing fantasies. They paid for my apartment, but reminded me constantly how generous they were, how lucky I was to have their support, as if love came with monthly invoices. I worked part-time at a cafe, barely scraping by, but I still hoped I could carve out independence. The trip to Colorado was supposed to be a gesture of celebration, one last hurrah before adulthood. From the moment we packed into the SUV, I knew something was off. Derek made a crack about my suitcase being heavier than my GPA. Trent kept turning up the radio every time I tried to talk. Dad took the long route just to blame my directions. By nightfall, at a motel in Nebraska, I overheard them through the wall. "She's too soft," Mom said. "Maybe this trip will toughen her up." I curled into bed, trying not to cry. I didn't know that was the last night I'd ever travel with them. The next day, we crossed into Wyoming. Endless plains, a sky so wide it swallowed you whole. Around noon, Dad pulled into a small gas station in a town called Pinecrest. "We need gas," he said casually. "Grab me a Coke," Derek mumbled without looking up from his phone. "Beef jerky," Trent added. My mom was reapplying lipstick in the mirror. I nodded and went inside. The gas station was quiet, the kind with buzzing fluorescent lights and a single cashier. Her name tag read Marla. I used the restroom, bought the snacks, and added a bottle of water and chips for myself. "Heading somewhere fun?" Marla asked. "Colorado. Family vacation." I said, still believing in that word. Well, enjoy it, she smiled. I remember that because it was the last kind thing I heard that day. I pushed open the door to the parking lot, expecting to see the SUV idling by the pump. But it was gone. I blinked, walked around the building. Maybe they moved to the side. Maybe Dad went to check the tires. Maybe they were joking. I called Dad. No answer. Called Mom. Voicemail. Derek finally picked up. "Where are you?" I asked, heart pounding. Laughter. "20 miles down the road? We thought you'd figure it out." "Turn around. Come get me." My voice cracked. "Let's see if she makes it back on her own," Derek shouted. More laughter. Then the call dropped. I stared at my phone. A text buzzed in. A photo of them grinning in the car with the caption, "Survival of the fittest, sis. Good luck." Then I was blocked. All of them. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. I sat down on the curb. The sun was hot. My hands shook. I had $43 in cash, a debit card with barely $100, and a dying phone battery. My suitcase was gone. My family gone. A text came in from Trent. "Hope you found lunch. LOL." 3 hours later, I was still sitting there. Marla came out, concern in her eyes. "You okay?" The question shattered something. I told her everything. Through tears, through shame. "They left you here?" she whispered. "On purpose? It's supposed to be a lesson. They say I'm too soft." Marla's expression shifted. "I know someone. Her name's Eleanor. Rents out a room. Let me call her." That night, I stayed in Eleanor's guest room, a tiny space with a twin bed and a clean blanket. She made me tea and lent me a nightgown. I lay there in the dark, waiting for texts, for apologies, for someone to realize they'd gone too far. None came. Just one more text from my dad the next morning. "Time to grow up, Jenna. You'll thank us later." Then silence. Eleanor let me call their landline. No one picked up. The receptionist at their office said they were in a meeting. They never called back. That afternoon, Eleanor offered me a deal. "You can stay here, help me with the bookstore, work off rent until you get on your feet." I nodded, because I had nothing left to lose, because I had nowhere else to go, and because in that moment I realized something terrifying and liberating. Maybe being left behind wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of cinnamon and coffee. Eleanor had made oatmeal and brewed a full pot, placing a chipped ceramic mug at the kitchen table like it had always belonged to me. "We'll figure this out," she said simply. I nodded, still not trusting my voice. After breakfast, she handed me a notebook. "Write down everything you need to do, one step at a time." The first thing I wrote was, "Get a job." The second, "Charge phone." We started with the basics. Eleanor let me use the landline to call my old calf job in Chicago. They'd replaced me. I wasn't surprised. My apartment manager didn't answer, but a voicemail said rent was past due. My bank account showed $227.42, enough to maybe survive a week if I ate toast and walked everywhere. That afternoon, Eleanor took me to the bookstore. "Pages and Pine," it said in faded lettering above the window. It was dusty and charming and quiet. She had owned it for over 30 years. Inside, the shelves leaned a little, the floorboards creaked, and the register sometimes beeped twice before opening. But there was a warmth to it, like the kind of place you hide inside during a thunderstorm. "I can give you some hours," she said. "Nothing official. cash in hand, helps you and helps me. I started the next morning, alphabetized the fiction section, wiped down dusty shelves, updated the events calendar which hadn't been touched since April. I found flyers for a poetry reading from 2 years ago still taped to the back door. "This place needs some love," I said, and Eleanor smiled like she'd been waiting for someone to say that out loud. That evening, I walked downtown and applied everywhere. Diners, grocery stores, hardware stores, even a florist who looked me up and down and said, "You're not from here, are you?" I told her I wasn't, but I was hoping to be. The Pinewood Diner hired me the next morning. Breakfast and lunch shifts. Minimum wage plus tips, which weren't great, but enough to cover basic expenses. I borrowed Eleanor's laptop and updated my resume. Started building a new portfolio using mock projects. My fingers ached from carrying plates in the morning and typing designs at night, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was building something that belonged to me. On the third night of my new routine, a woman named Amber sat beside me in the break room of the diner. She was 25, a single mom with a tired laugh and sharp eyes. She watched me push a cold sandwich around my plate for a full 5 minutes before asking, "Family trouble?" I told her everything. Her silence was gentle and deliberate. When I finished, she said, "Jenna, what they did wasn't just cruel. It was abandonment. You're not broken. You're free." That night, I cried harder than I had in days, but the tears felt different. Not weak, just honest. Over the next 2 weeks, my world shrank to the space between the diner and the bookstore. But slowly, Pinecrest started to open itself to me. Customers began remembering my name. One man brought his dog every morning for a biscuit and asked if I liked crossword puzzles. Amber introduced me to her circle, other young people stuck or starting over. It turned out a lot of the people came to Pinecrest not because it was perfect, but because it gave them space to become something else. Eleanor asked if I'd help design a new flyer for an author event. "You got a good eye," she said. I hadn't touched Photoshop since graduation, but as I stared at the blank canvas on the bookstore computer, something inside me clicked. I made a flyer with clean typography, a moody forest background, and a photo of the author layered in a subtle duotone. "You made this?" Eleanor asked the next morning, holding the print. "It looks like something from a magazine." She taped one to the front window. Within 3 days, book sales for that author doubled. On day 4, Mason walked in. Bearded, mid-30s, flannel and glasses. He asked Eleanor who designed the flyer. She pointed to me. He introduced himself as a freelance web developer. "I'm terrible with anything visual," he admitted, "but I've got clients who need branding. Ever thought about freelancing?" "I don't even know how to invoice," I said, laughing nervously. "I can teach you." That week, we started working together in the evenings. He showed me how to set up Trello boards, client folders, payment systems. I designed his logo. He taught me HTML basics. I taught him how to choose a font that didn't look like it came from 1998. He paid me in cash for the first project, $150. I cried when he handed it to me. I bought a new pair of shoes and groceries that didn't come in bulk discount packs. One evening, Mason said, "You're the most natural UI designer I've worked with." I didn't know what to say, so I said thank you. The texts from my family stopped after week 3. No more sarcastic memes or passive-aggressive reminders to grow up. I blocked their numbers, not out of anger anymore, but clarity. They weren't part of my story now. By month 2, I had 3 freelance clients, a bakery that needed a logo, a wedding planner who wanted help with her social media graphics, a local animal shelter that needed an adoption poster. I worked at the diner from 6 to 2, the bookstore from 3 to 6, freelanced from 7 to midnight. Eleanor offered to lower my rent, but I insisted on paying in full. It wasn't much, just $300, but it was mine. I started calling the small room with the twin bed home. One day, while eating lunch on the porch, I realized I hadn't checked my Chicago apartment emails in weeks. When I logged in, I saw one from my old landlord. "Please advise on your belongings. We must clear the unit by Friday." I replied, "Donate what you can, dispose of the rest." Hitting send felt like throwing away the last anchor to a past I no longer wanted to carry. The desk my father had picked out, the lamp my mother insisted matched the curtains. Gone. It was liberation disguised as loss. Mason introduced me to a client in a nearby town who needed a full rebrand. It paid more than anything I'd done so far. With that check, I put a deposit down on a studio apartment above the hardware store. It was barely 400 square feet, but it had a window, a tiny kitchen, and a lock that only I had the key to. I moved in with a second-hand couch, a folding table, and a potted plant I named Leo. That first night, I sat on the floor, eating pizza off a paper towel, and whispered, "You did it." No one clapped. No one needed to. For the first time, I wasn't living for applause or approval. I was just living. Pinecrest had become my world, my community, my freedom, and I wasn't going anywhere. 3 months after I moved into my studio apartment above the hardware store, something happened that ripped open the quiet life I had so carefully stitched back together. It started with a client meeting in Denver. I had taken the early morning bus into the city to pitch branding ideas to a small tech startup looking for a visual identity that didn't scream 2008. I wore my nicest outfit, a navy blue blouse, and fitted black slacks, carried my printed portfolio in a leather sleeve, and ordered a coffee at a quiet shop near the 16th Street Mall while I waited. That's when I heard it. "Jenna?" I turned, and there he was, Derek, my oldest brother, his hair a little grayer than I remembered, his suit immaculate, his expression somewhere between stunned and smug. "Holy crap, it is you." My chest tightened. My first instinct was to run, but my legs wouldn't move. He sat down across from me without asking. "We've been looking for you for over a year," he said. "Mom hired someone after Brett thought he saw you here last spring." "I wasn't lost," I replied, voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I left. Look, I know it was a messed up joke," he said, rubbing his jaw like the words physically pained him. "But come on, we thought you'd call. You didn't. You ghosted us." "You left me in the middle of Wyoming," I said, leaning in. "You blocked my number. You cut off my apartment, and you expected me to call you?" He flinched. "We thought you'd figure it out. You always were the smart one." "That's what you call it? Figuring it out?" I asked, my voice rising. "I had $43 and a phone that died by sunset. You thought that was a test?" "Dad said it would toughen you up." "It broke me," I snapped, "then rebuilt me into someone who doesn't need any of you." "Mom and Dad want to see you. They feel terrible," he said, clearly uncomfortable. "They've changed." "No, they're just old now," I said flatly. Getting soft with time isn't the same as regret. Derek reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. They're planning to sell the business, split the proceeds 3 ways. You're still on the paperwork." I stared at it, untouched. "Money won't fix what you did." "It's not about the money," he said quickly. "It's about doing the right thing." I laughed once, a short, dry sound. "The right thing would have been turning the car around." He leaned in, voice lower. "There are rumors, Jenna. People think you had a breakdown, that you're in rehab or living under a bridge. Is that what you want?" "I want peace. I want silence from the people who tormented me for decades." "You always were too sensitive," he muttered. "And you were always a bully hiding behind a smile," I shot back. "I'm not that girl anymore, Derek. I don't cry in bathrooms or beg to be included." He looked genuinely shocked, like he hadn't realized I was capable of standing up to him. Like the Jenna Monroe sitting across from him in business attire, sipping coffee in downtown Denver, wasn't compatible with the doormat he remembered. "Come back for a visit," he said, "just to see everyone." "Why? So you can all pat yourselves on the back for pretending to care now that I'm successful?" I stood, gathering my things. "Don't call me again. Don't show up at my office. My life isn't yours anymore." I left him there, in that coffee shop, and didn't look back. But the truth is, I shook the entire walk to the client meeting. Rage and grief tangled together inside me like wires in a burning wall. That night, I drove back to Pinecrest with my hands gripping the wheel tighter than they needed to. The sky was wide and dark, and I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because I was done bleeding for people who never knew how to stop the knife. The next morning, I went to Eleanor's and told her everything. She listened without interruption, then poured us both tea. "You don't owe them anything," she said, "but you owe yourself the right to choose, on your terms." I nodded, and that evening I invited Mason, Amber, and the rest of my closest circle to the bookstore after hours. For the first time, I told them the full story, not the sugar-coated version, not the vague references, the truth, the prank, the abandonment, the years of cruelty disguised as comedy. When I finished, Amber reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "They don't get to rewrite the ending," she said. "You already did." With their blessing, I sent one final email to my parents and brothers. No venom, no pity, just truth. I wrote, "I am safe. I am thriving. I have a business, a home, a community. I do not want reconciliation. I do not want contact. Any further attempts will be considered harassment and handled accordingly. This is not a door left ajar. It is a door closed with intention." I hit send, then blocked their emails. Again. And for the first time since Wyoming, I felt something close to power. I walked out onto Main Street, the sun setting behind the ridge, and I felt the air on my skin like it was mine. I wasn't hiding. I was home. A week later, we launched the new bookstore website. Business jumped 20% in the first 2 weeks. Mason and I secured 3 new clients. Amber's son started calling me Aunt Jenna, and my plant, Leo, bloomed for the first time. Everything they took from me I had rebuilt, but better, on my terms, stronger, steadier, whole. And they were never going to take that from me again. It was a quiet Thursday morning when the envelope arrived. Thick, ivory paper, a gold-embossed return address from a law firm in Chicago. I opened it with the same caution I'd once reserved for my father's footsteps down the hall. Inside was a formal letter. The Monroe Insurance Group had been sold. Proceeds were to be divided equally between Charles, Linda, Derek, Trent, and me. I sat at my kitchen counter staring at the figure listed beside my name. 6 digits, enough to buy a house outright in Pinecrest, enough to make my small agency expand threefold. I didn't feel excitement. I felt nothing. Until I found the second envelope. Tucked behind the legal papers was a handwritten letter. The slanted cursive was instantly familiar. "Jana," it began, "by the time you receive this, your father and I will have moved to Arizona. He finally agreed to retire, though not without protest. We are hosting a family gathering next month at the old house before we leave. Derek and Trent will be there. We'd like you to come. No expectations, no pressure, just a chance to close old chapters before new ones begin. With love, Mom." I folded the letter carefully, tucked it back into the envelope, and placed it in my desk drawer. I didn't touch it for a week. Sam noticed the change in me, my quiet moods at dinner, the way I stared a little too long out the window. "Are you going to go?" he asked gently. I shook my head, then nodded. "I don't know." For days, I weighed the cost of closure. I thought about our twin girls, Emma and Lily, now 6, about what I would tell them one day when they asked why they'd never met their grandparents. I didn't want my story to become their silence. I booked a ticket, a flight in that morning, a hotel 1 town over, 1 day. That was all I would give. The Monroe house hadn't changed. A stately colonial with black shutters, pristine hedges, and a driveway too proud to show cracks. My mother answered the door. She looked older, smaller. "You came," she whispered. I nodded. She led me through the familiar hallway, past the grand piano no one played, past the photographs still frozen in a time I no longer belonged to. My father stood on the back patio. He was thinner now, paler. He looked like a man unraveling from the inside out. "Jana," he said. Just my name. No apology. But his voice cracked. That was new. We made it through lunch with strained civility. My brothers made small talk. Their wives hovered nearby, unsure what role I now played in this family tableau. No one mentioned the gas station. No one dared, but it lived in the silence between every sentence. After dessert, my father asked if I'd speak with him in his study. The room I once feared, with its heavy doors and darker warnings. He closed the door slowly and sat behind the desk. "I won't pretend to know what to say," he began. "But I know I was wrong." I said nothing. My father was cruel. I thought that's how you made kids strong, by breaking them a little. His voice trembled. "But you weren't weak. You were never weak. You were just human." He paused, then added, "You did better without us than I ever imagined." I finally spoke. "You left me to fail, and I succeeded, not because of you, in spite of you." He nodded. "I know." He didn't cry. Neither did I. There was no dramatic reconciliation, just an exchange. Regret for truth, shame for silence. When I left the next morning, my mother stood on the porch and placed something in my hand. It was a photo of me at age 5, holding a marker-streaked poster that read, "World's Best Designer." I didn't remember it, but she did. I didn't hug her, but I didn't turn away either. Back in Pinecrest, Emma ran into my arms and asked if I brought cookies. Sam wrapped me in a hug that said everything I hadn't spoken aloud. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the Wyoming stars. I thought about who I had become. a business owner, a partner, a mother, a survivor. I wasn't the girl at the gas station anymore. I wasn't the punchline. I wasn't the abandoned. I was Jenna Monroe. And I had rewritten my story from the ashes of their joke. When the money transferred, I donated half of it to fund scholarships for girls pursuing design who had no support. The other half expanded New Horizon into a 3-state agency with a team of 15. The day we opened our new headquarters in Pinecrest's renovated post office building, Eleanor cut the ribbon. Amber brought cupcakes. Mason cried. I smiled. 1 month later, a woman emailed me from Business West magazine. "We'd love to feature your journey," she wrote, "from nowhere to national reach." I agreed to the interview, but left out the gas station. That piece of the story wasn't theirs to tell. It was mine. And I'd already lived it.